Kohberger was a PhD criminology student. He was actually
Isn't that kind of eerie? That's eerie that he was a criminology student.
It's beyond eerie. I mean, there are literally Reddit threads where this guy's asking people, like, surveying them, like, how did you feel about the crime after you committed it? Like, what kind of emotions were you experiencing during the crime? Like, he was fascinated with crime, it seems, in a very eerie way. He'd actually applied to be a police officer at one point.
I'm glad that did not work out.
Yeah, right? Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Brief. This week, Biden's been caught in a hypocritical scandal. We have an update on the Idaho murder case, and Andrew Tate faces sexual assault allegations. Let's jump in. Happy Tuesday, Brad.
Hey, how's Phoenix doing?
He's doing so much better. He was a little droopy the first 24 hours after he came home, probably from his medicines, but he has been back to full energy ever since, growing like a weed. My parents stopped through town yesterday on their way to see Rory, as they call it. They no longer go to see Caleb and Casey. They go to see Rory, my niece, the baby. So they stopped to see Phoenix, and they were like, he's doubled in size since Christmas. And I was looking back at pictures, and he actually has. He's so much bigger already. So it's just kind of interesting because when they're growing day in, day out, you don't notice it as much. But then when you look back, like all of a sudden they're huge. Anyways, What have you been up to?
Not a whole lot, honestly. Just enjoying the wonderful Michigan winter. It's a delight. It's actually not been that cold, to be honest. So I can't tell if
are you being facetious? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's usually pretty rough, but it hasn't been bad. So I've been good.
I mean, it's been actually an uncommonly warm winter here so far. And as I've talked about on the show before, I'm so thankful for that because I have really bad SAD. And my SAD, seasonal depression disorder, is usually like way worse in January and February. I think because all the holidays are over. There's nothing fun about January and February. Like, I really think the powers that be need to do more. Give us something in January and February, something to celebrate, something to look forward to, some kind of special flavored coffees, ice creams, anything. I'll take anything. There's nothing. It's just gray and dreary and blah. But I will say I'm really proud of myself because in years past, I would always sort of intentionally book up my travel schedule January through February just so I could stay on the move and not deal with the winter. But thanks to Phoenix, that is not so easy to do anymore. And I'm doing this thing this year. This is kind of part of a New Year's resolution for me, where I am trying to intentionally make more of an effort to actually plant and build my life in the city where I live instead of just jet setting all over the place. And so I'm trying to, and it's taken some willpower, but I'm pretty proud of myself for that. I'm doing a lot of paint by numbers. I don't know if you've ever painted by numbers, Brad, but I was recently introduced to this. Yes. So I've always wanted to be an artist, but I have no artistic talent. Like, I literally got kicked out of art class at 7. The art teacher told my mom, like, nah, don't waste your money. She doesn't have it. So I've always wanted to be an artist, but no talent. But my friend Maggie, our mutual friend Maggie, recently introduced me to this thing, Paint by Numbers. And you can literally buy like a Van Gogh painting, and it has all these paints and brushes included, and it shows you exactly what to paint where. Like, you paint based on the numbers assigned to the paint, and you end up painting a masterpiece. So that's been really fun to me, cool. And I highly suggest it. All right, well, somebody who has certainly not been painting by the numbers or any other kind of rules, it seems, is Biden in the current administration. There has been a huge scandal that broke over the past week, 2 weeks or so. And Brad, I have to admit, I'm a little bored with this scandal, but you've convinced me that there's more to it that I should be interested. So I'm going to let you make the case to me and the audience.
Yeah, so Attorney General Merrick Garland has now appointed a special prosecutor to investigate President Biden, the same president that appointed him. This is an experienced attorney, Robert Hur, and he's investigating Biden over potentially mishandling classified documents. Does that sound familiar? I mean, we had Trump, and now we had Hillary, and now we have Biden having a classified document mishandling scandal. People, is it just me, or is it like not that hard to not mishandle classified information? They have systems set up that's actually pretty hard to mishandle it, from what I understand. Yet they've now managed 3 in a row to keep messing this up. It's almost impressive.
See, I don't know that I totally agree with that. I feel like it might not be as hard as you think because of one simple fact, which is that in DC, they classify virtually everything, right? They want to classify anything they can possibly get away with because they don't want to have to turn information over under Freedom of Information Acts or other kinds of disclosures. They don't want accountability. They don't want transparency. And I also feel like they do that because it's a pretty easy thing to go after people for. It's kind of like if you don't pay your taxes, right? Like, they might not get you for murder. They might not get you for being in the mafia, but if you don't pay your taxes, they're going to ring you for that. That's kind of my feeling on classified documents, where I'm just sort of like, I don't know. Maybe there's something significant in these documents, but I think the likelihood is actually that they're like overly classified, and this is just a simple mistake when everything's classified around you.
I think they do definitely overclassify stuff, but that said, once it is classified, I mean, you have to go somewhere specific, retrieve it, and it's marked as classified, and then knowingly take it out of that location and store it somewhere else. It seems to me like that would be a pretty easy thing to not do, especially if you are President Biden and have been on the record talking about how horrific it is to mishandle classified information. Take a listen to this clip of President Biden talking about Trump's big bad mishandling at Mar-a-Lago.
How that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible. And I thought, what data was in there that may compromise sources and methods? By that I mean names of people who helped, or et cetera. And it's just totally irresponsible.
So, Hannah, isn't it just so irresponsible to do something like this?
That was a hilarious clip. And this guy's had so many gaffes over the decades. You would think he'd be a little bit more careful in the media about what he says. But nope, never really checking himself. There is absolute hubris there, total hypocrisy. I mean, just the gravity in which he said that made it so funny. Like, who knows what could possibly be in there? How could this happen? That is pretty funny to have to play back. But I mean, even when the Trump thing was going down, and I am no fan of Trump, as I have made known, I sort of thought that was a nothing burger too. It seemed like a bit of a witch hunt. It seemed like yet another example of the Biden administration weaponizing the government against political enemies and just kind of trying to create hysteria around Trump. Like, I thought some of the questions around like even the ethical or legal realm of him doing that to somebody who he thought might be his political opponent in a few years. Like, I thought those were valid questions. And I always thought the media and the left kind of overblew the Trump situation as well. So I already had that going into this. Now seeing him get caught in the same situation just makes it look even more ridiculous, and also makes it look like more of a nothing burger for what Trump was doing.
See, the reason, I'm not sure I agree that it's a nothing burger. I think it's definitely not what they've made it out to be. But the thing is that bothers me is you and I both believe presidents aren't above the law. Politicians aren't above the law. And if a regular person, David French, who's a former JAG, has talked about this, if a regular person in the military or in the intelligence community or something did what these three individuals, Clinton, Trump, and Biden, have done with classified information, they would go to jail.
Yeah.
But the government has a different standard when it comes to prosecuting people who are politically involved. And I think that, well, maybe some of this isn't really that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. That's wrong.
I mean, I think that's the most compelling argument for me here is we know that the use of classified documents is what they use to go after Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, all kinds of whistleblowers. Again, this is something that they keep in their pocket, I think, to go after people when they can't necessarily ring them for something else. So he's absolutely right. And I like David French. I think he's far more conservative than I am and really, really bad on foreign policy and a few other things. But as a whole, he's a very smart legal mind and a very nuanced conservative voice. So I appreciate his arguments. And I think he's absolutely right here. If a normal person did this, they would be taking them to task and there would be really no question involved.
And it's just also the audacity. Let me get into some of the details here of what Biden has done from the dispatch. Biden aides on November 2nd found documents at the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, a think tank in Washington Biden used as an office after leaving the Naval Observatory. Things have only gotten worse for the president from there. Another batch of classified documents, because at first they were like, oh, just one. And well, another batch was found in the garage of his home in Wilmington, Delaware. And 6 more pages were then found last week in a room adjacent to the garage. And they write here, at least none have been found yet at his Rehoboth Beach residence. Now, one important distinction to make is that Biden immediately complied and turned them all over, where Trump denied that he had any and has led some people to accuse him of obstruction. So it's not quite apples to apples. But I really don't see how the Biden administration could just in any way, politically, legally, really decide to prosecute Trump over this while it's happening to their own head honcho.
I have some questions about this too. Like, how were these documents all of a sudden discovered in his garage. That makes
Oh, well, there
so
are theories
little
about
sense.
this. The theory is that they saw Trump getting Mar-a-Lago raided and said, shoot, we should check if we've got anything going on. And then they kept finding all this stuff, and they're like, crap, let's turn this over ASAP, which is just, if that's how it played out, hilarious.
That is very, very funny and also just so random. I mean, like when I first read the report, I thought they'd found them in one of his nonprofits or like legal offices or something like that. They were in his garage. That's so sus.
Well, the first batch were in his office at a nonprofit, or at the Penn Biden Center, which is a think tank. But then they found those, and they're like, I guess we should check everywhere else. And they found a bunch in his garage and in adjacent buildings. But he reassured us at a press conference the other day. It was a locked garage.
Oh, good.
Don't worry. Next to his
helps.
Corvette.
Yeah, his Corvette. He drives a Corvette. I'm sorry. That's hilarious. I associate Corvettes with Kentucky because I grew up in Kentucky and that's where they're made. And like to me, a Corvette is the most Kentucky car. So that's
Really?
very funny to me.
Well, there's not too much to say about this whole scandal, I guess. We thought we'd give you our take, bring you up to date on it. We'll see how it plays out. There's now a special prosecutor appointed who will investigate Biden and come back, and then it will be up to Merrick Garland. What does he do? Does he prosecute his boss, or does he not prosecute and then make it look like he's covering for the administration that appointed him? I think it'll be interesting, and don't be surprised if more documents turn up at Biden's favorite ice cream shop or wherever he misplaced them.
I mean, they've definitely got themselves in a pickle now because you really can't just back out of this when you made the huge hullabaloo you did over Trump. And now if you do one thing to Trump, you have to do it to yourselves. And what a terrible chess game they just played. Anyways, all right, let's move on to our next topic. We got a lot of feedback from you guys when we covered the Idaho college murder case a few weeks ago, mostly because this was a case that largely a lot of people did not know about. And I don't know about you guys, but it's one that just keeps me up at night still. I cannot stop researching this case. I get like this sometimes, not all the time about true crime incidents, but like there's some cases that just like I can't stop thinking about. And I've tried to figure out why that is. And I think it's because like in college, I lived in these kinds of houses. Like I had multiple roommates. We had party houses. There was people coming in and out. And I think about the number of times like we left our doors unlocked, or like there were random people in the house we didn't know, like all of those kinds of things. It just really hits home to me like how scary this is. But there have been some developments in the case. And one reason I want to bring it up is not only to update you guys in case you haven't seen what all has unfolded, but I also think because I'm really passionate about making sure at least our audience members are equipped, if they are ever called to be jurors, to make good decisions. Because I think that's one thing that we do a terrible job of is educating people and helping them know how to process information if they ever are on a jury and how to evaluate like what's good evidence, what's good practices, what's bad. And I really...
Isn't it a shame? Sorry to interrupt, but isn't it a shame you and I will never get to be jurors? Because we'd be good jurors.
Oh my God. Actually, I got my first ever jury summons. It's in like 2 weeks. I know they'll never pick me.
They're going to disqualify you. The prosecutors are going to look at your tweets. They're going to Google Hannah Cox prosecutor, and they're going to say, nope, X.
They're going to find my whole based episode on prosecutors. They're going to see I overturned the death penalty in 3 states. Like, I'm out of there. I understand that. But I'm still just excited to get my toe in the water. Like, I would die to be on a jury. And the
whisper to all the other potential jurors, look up jury nullification.
Nullification. Yeah. But the sad thing is, like, I actually think I would be a very impartial jurist. I don't think that I would go in there and just be like, innocent. That's not the case. I want to see violent people off the streets as much as the next person, especially whoever committed this kind of crime. So I would actually be really impartial. I would just have the tools to evaluate. And that's what we started based over, right? We have always said my initial tagline has been learn how to think, not what to think. So I'm going to talk about that based in this case, but I want you to be thinking as I'm progressing through this, how I'm thinking through these things. And hopefully that kind of gives you how you should evaluate things if you're in a similar position to weigh in. So here's the basic updates we have. There was arrests made in the case on December 30th, my real birthday, 6 weeks after the incident. They've charged 28-year-old graduate student Brian Kohberger in his home state of Pennsylvania, where he was then extradited back to Idaho. Kohberger is facing 4 counts of first-degree murder and a count of felony burglary and is being held without bail. Monroe County Chief Public Defender Jason LaBarre, who represented Kohberger for his extradition hearing in Pennsylvania, told CBS News that police said they knocked on the Kohberger's door around 3 a.m. December 30th, and both the parents and the suspect were, quote, quote, very cooperative. He said Kohberger... Yeah. He said Kohberger would be represented by the chief public defender in Idaho's county, once in the state. The attorney also said that Kohberger denies allegations of his involvement in the killings and believes that he will be exonerated. Kohberger appeared in an Idaho court on January 12th, and a preliminary hearing was set for June 26th, which is pretty far out, but that's because he waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing, with his defense team asking the court for time to prepare for the case. Idaho authorities initially said state law limited how much information they can release about aspects of the quadruple homicide investigation that led them to Kohberger until the suspect appeared in Idaho court. Court documents were unsealed Thursday. So when that happened, we all of a sudden got a treasure trove of information. And I'll be the first to say, I had a lot of questions about the police incompetence, it seemed, in this case from the very beginning. They really were not doing a great job as far as the public discourse. They gave a lot of back and forth statements, what seemed like misinformation. They didn't seem to be handling evidence very well. They weren't giving very much information even to the families who were getting a bit irked with them. And it seemed like this was on the verge of being a cold case to many of us, which was outrageous. I have to eat my words now. I think with what we've learned now, and in reviewing these documents I'm about to discuss, I now think they were super strategic in what they've been doing. They were playing this very close to their chest, and I think they're actually doing a pretty good job of investigating and building a solid case. So I'm going to give you a few things that we've learned. One, at the time of his arrest, Kohberger was a PhD criminology student. He was actually
Isn't that kind of eerie? That's eerie that he was a criminology student.
It's beyond eerie. I mean, there are literally Reddit threads where this guy's asking people, like, surveying them, like, how did you feel about the crime after you committed it? Like, what kind of emotions were you experiencing during the crime? Like, he was fascinated with crime, it seems, in a very eerie way. He'd actually applied to be a police officer at one point.
I'm glad that did not work out.
Yeah, right? And he was actually a teaching assistant as well at the Washington State University's Pullman campus, which is only about a 15-minute drive from the house in Moscow, Idaho. I want to pause there because just with that information alone, people are starting to actually somewhat blame the university and some of their professors and saying that they were complicit in educating a criminal. I just want your take on that.
Yeah, that's weird to me. I really don't like any sort of take when you have a crime and people say, oh, so-and-so has blood on their hands. It's like, actually, I think the killer or the criminal is responsible for their actions. And you would need some really direct causal evidence before starting to assign guilt to third parties. That's like when Biden said Facebook is killing people because of misinformation or something. It's like you're stripping agency from people in a way I really don't like. I think that Brian Kohberger is responsible for Brian Kohberger's crimes, not a university. What are they supposed to do? Not let people sign up for criminology courses based on what? I mean, that's a weird line of argument to me.
Right, and you could expand that to virtually anything. Like if you're a law professor and somebody you educate goes and commits Brady violations or tort reform law, like are you responsible for that? Or if you're a business teacher, are you responsible if they commit white collar crimes? Like, no, of course not. So none of that actually tracks. Okay, so I agree that that's a really bad way of looking at things. But in response to that, the University of Washington has had an equally bad response where they have reportedly been completely blocking students from even bringing this case up in their criminology classes. They've actually even told them, according to reports by Nancy Grace, that there is a legal problem if they bring this up in class, which makes absolutely no sense and would definitely be a First Amendment violation. And it seems as a whole meant to sort of just completely...
This is a public university, right?
Yeah.
So they're bound by the First Amendment. They can't just be like, no discussing this.
And threatening to like kick kids out of classes if they do. I mean, that seems really sus and beyond the pale and like an overreaction. I understand that like this is terrible PR for your university, but that is not the way that you handle that at all. Glad we're in agreement on that. I thought we would be. All right, let's go back to affidavit. Now, since that has been released, and I want to say this is an amazing affidavit. If you've never read one, you should take a look at it because a lot of times police are really cagey, even in these affidavits, not very forthcoming, or they're full of like legalese. This one was written in such a way where I felt like they were intentionally trying to give the public concrete information, as much of a timeline and proof of evidence as they possibly could without threatening their case. And they did it in such a way where it's easy to read, it's easy to ascertain. And I just thought as a whole that they've handled now the like PR of this case really, really well in hindsight.
To hear Hannah praising the police. I
know. I'm actually like, I actually think the police are doing a good job in this case. And I rarely say that about a case, but so far I've been pretty impressed. The timeline that they released, they say that the car that is attached to Brian Kohberger traveled near the student's house in Moscow, Idaho, beginning at 3:29 a.m. the morning of the November 13th murders, and at 4:04 a.m. the cops circled the area for the fourth time. He was seen again leaving the area around 4:20 a.m. at a quote high rate of speed. So they believe that all 4 murders were committed between 4:04 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. They also believe that one of the victims, Xana, was actually awake. She had just picked up a DoorDash delivery, and her phone showed that she was on TikTok at around 4 a.m. So likely she was awake when he murdered her, and she was found in her bathroom. She actually was not found in her bed next to her boyfriend, as it was initially reported. Investigators then got a hold of video footage of Washington State University Pullman, where Kohberger was studying for his PhD, and saw a white Elantra that was headed east towards the directly towards the University of Idaho just before 3 a.m. on the night of the murders. At around 5:25 a.m. that same morning, the Elantra was spotted returning to Kohberger's campus. So that's their first piece of evidence. It's pretty sus. This guy lives 15 minutes away. He has no attachment to the University of Idaho or this area, and he's suspiciously driving and circling around the house right around the time of the murders multiple times over. So that's in and of itself going to be pretty hard to explain away. Yes. But it gets even worse. They have a ton of evidence. First, they disclosed that the perpetrator left the knife sheath next to the body of Madison Mogen. And that actually had DNA evidence on it. And this was really key. They never found the murder weapon, but this sheath was key in actually beginning to solve the murder, because they were able to use that DNA and start tracking people near the area who had similar DNA, and then start matching that with the car that they had video footage of, which I got to say, they got thousands of people who turned over like their Ring doorbell cameras and evidence. Like the public really did do a lot to help solve this case too, it seems, and it really did pan out. They then tracked that DNA reportedly through a public DNA database first, but then they went through his parents' trash as well and confirmed it. They also tracked the cell phone data, and they saw that he turned his phone off for just the duration of the crime, which, like, I don't think you could get dumber than this. If you were going to commit a crime.
Babe, that's obviously a coincidence.
Yeah. Oops. Just happened to go into airplane mode.
I also turned off my phone from 4 a.m. to 4:20 that day. Who didn't?
Yeah, who doesn't just randomly turn off their phone? They say that his phone pinged around 2. This is what makes it even crazier. Like, if you're going to commit a murder, why would you not leave your phone at home the entire time? I'm guessing
especially if you're a criminology student, you should know better.
Yeah, like this guy's an idiot. They say his phone pinged around 2:47 a.m. the night of the murder in Pullman, where he lived. The phone then went silent until approximately 4:48 a.m. when it suddenly showed that it pinged on a highway just south of Moscow. So not only did he take it with him, turn it off to try to hide himself from cops, but he turned it back on his way home. And then it shows that he turned west and then going north towards his apartment in Pullman around 5:30 a.m. It gets even worse. Cell phone data obtained by investigators also revealed that Kohberger's phone pinged near the murder house at least 12 times in the months before the massacre. So he turned it off this one time, but he's stalking the house and driving around it at least 12 times in the months leading up to the murders. And you didn't think they could go back that far? Like, what? They said on all of these occasions except for one, that it occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of the respective days, and the data suggested he might have been staking out the crime and stalking the victims. Yes. Worse, police said his phone pinged at the house itself, again, around 9:15 a.m. the next morning of the crime. So they think he went back, basically, to catch a glimpse of his work. Your response?
Wow. I just can't get over the fact that a criminology student should know better. I feel like, not that I ever would, but I feel like I've watched enough Law and Order to evade obvious mistakes if I was going to commit a crime.
Yeah, that's kind of my general takeaway. Like, this guy, I don't know, I want to say, like, innocent until proven guilty. Absolutely, I want to see this go through the full court and due process, and, like, we've not heard anything from the defense, so I always want to keep that caveat in mind. But so far, the preponderance of evidence they have gathered is quite damning, and he just does have that, like, crazy look to him. And
Have they found anything about motive?
They may have. They actually are still sealing a good bit of information from the public. But I want to kind of get into more of what they've released and whatnot, and why I think that is, because I think they do understand a motive, but I think they're, again, playing this very close to their chest. Just to round out the evidence that they found, they also had local police pull him and his dad over. They were driving from Washington to Pennsylvania over the holidays. They had local police pull him over twice to check for markings on his hands with their body camera footage, which is just nice additional evidence. They found that he tried to switch the license plates on his car 5 days after the crime. And then,
obvious.
And then this is kind of what gets into the real bombshell of the report. They have a footprint that was left by one of the surviving roommates, Dylan's door. Now, I want to turn our attention to Dylan because this is all over Reddit and TikTok, and it's become very controversial, and I will just preface by saying I'm Team Dylan, but I'm going to explain why. So one of the two surviving roommates in the University of Idaho murder cases, Dylan Mortensen, came face to face with the killer just after he stabbed the 4 students to death, and that was only revealed once the affidavit was unsealed. Mortensen saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her, the affidavit said. She stood in a quote, frozen shock as he walked past her and towards the sliding glass doors. She then locked herself in her room. Before she saw the killer, Mortensen, 21, told police she had woken up around the time of the murders and thought she heard Goncalves say, "There's someone here." Mortensen opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Xana Kernodle's room. Then she heard a male voice saying something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." The affidavit didn't explain why Mortensen and other surviving roommate Bethany Funke, 21, didn't call the police until more than 7 hours after the killing. Now, Dylan, once this came out, has received a tremendous amount of hate online for not jumping into action or calling the police until close to noon the next day. I think this makes all the sense in the world. Number one, if you know anything about trauma, anything about shock, it is not uncommon for a person to go into a frozen state and lose hours of time. So she didn't know exactly what had happened, but it is likely that she maybe was putting 2 and 2 together and did go into some sort of fear state. She might have even passed out. We still know that the initial report to the police around noon that was called in was of an unresponsive person. Now, the other thing that's interesting is police had made it seem like the 2 surviving roommates were on the first floor of the house. It turns out Dylan's room was actually on the second floor of the house and right across from Xana's and Ethan's room where they were killed. So as a whole, I think they did not want him to know that there was a surviving roommate who could have seen him on that floor. And I think that was a super strategic decision to not release that. I also think the other roommate could have come upstairs the next morning and found her unresponsive first, and that could have been the initial 911 call. We still don't know. Like I said, they're still not releasing everything. In fact, they just received approval to continue to seal the search warrants for the time being, which is kind of unusual. And what's even more unusual is that in the reasoning for doing that, they cite a potential threat to law enforcement, which most of the experts I've heard talking about say that usually is something you would see if there was like threat of retaliation from like gangs or other things like that. But in this case, it doesn't really make sense so far as what we know. But I think clearly there's other things they're wanting to keep close to their chest. And at this point, I think they have been very strategic, it seems, and they have done a good job of both keeping the public calm, but also protecting their case. So I'm going to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt in this and just say as a whole, you know, as a juror, if I was coming in hearing what I'm hearing right now, one thing I like is that any of these kinds of evidence can be very shaky on their own. 70% of eyewitness identifications have been responsible in wrongful convictions. And then in 45% of wrongful convictions, the misapplication of DNA has been responsible. Cell phone tower data has also been proven to be somewhat unreliable, right? Like it can be very reliable if all conditions are in order, but if say there's like bad weather conditions or something else going on, your phone could then ping another tower, whatever is the nearest one, and pick that up. And that's to make sure people don't lose service. So none of those things on their face would I be like guilty. But it is the preponderance of evidence, which is what cops and prosecutors are supposed to do. They're supposed to gather all kinds of information. So you've got eyewitness, you've got DNA, you've got the car, you've got his strange behavior, you've got the eyewitness testimony of the roommate, if I already said that. But anyways, you the cell phone data, the car's trajectory, all of these things I think accumulate to show that they're building a pretty solid case.
I have a hard time getting too upset with Dylan for not, obviously, we all wish Dylan had called the police immediately. That would have been the better thing to do. But I have a hard time. That's like victim blaming, to be like, you should have responded to this random, well, maybe not random, but this horrific act of mass murder better. Like, again, The problem is still the murderer. And I think unless you've been in such a traumatic situation, like imagine seeing somebody clad in black with a knife and a mask in your house in the middle of the night, and you lock your door. Unless you've been in such a traumatic situation, maybe don't be so quick to judge how somebody responds.
Yeah, I mean, flight, fight, or freeze is a real thing. And I think many people do freeze in those moments. You're terrified. And I also think it's ridiculous to say, this is what I do in the situation. You have no clue what you would do in that situation. And again, the footprint that they found backs up her story that he walked right past her door and exited the sliding door. We don't know exactly, but from her descriptions, it sounds like she was waking up, hearing something cracking her door, listening. And she went back to bed and then heard something else and cracked her door again. And then, the third time she cracked it, she saw something. But I think probably she knew something was up, right? I think probably as this is going, she's realizing, something's off in the house. So she's probably, not, full on in the door, standing there looking at him. She's probably, it's dark, it's cracked, she's looking through. He doesn't know that she's there. And she's very lucky for that. Because I think from what they've said so far, I don't think he went in there intending to kill 4 people. I think one of the 2 girls on the upper floor was the target, either Kaylee or Madison. And I think Xana and her boyfriend were collateral damage, as best I can tell. So if he'd seen her, she could have been dead as well. And that's just very fortunate for her that she survived. She's going to have a lifetime of trauma to overcome after living through this. And I'm sure guilt, right? I can't imagine the guilt you would feel in that situation, just survivor's guilt in general. So I feel really bad for Dylan that the internet's coming for her throat on this. And I just think it shows, again, how uneducated people are about criminology in general, about how people respond to it, about how trauma presents itself, and really about what a state of shock can do to a person. I mean, you really can go into a paralytic state when you've had enough shock. So as a whole, I'm praying for Dylan and her family. I can't imagine living through this, but I don't think we'll know a whole lot more until June. It seems like it's going to be probably pretty slow information until then, but at some point they will unseal more of these warrants and searches and probable causes, and we'll probably get more from there.
All right, well, speaking of criminality, somebody else is in a little bit of trouble with the law, and that is alpha male mega superstar online, Andrew Tate, who has actually been arrested in Romania, where he lives, on charges of suspected sexual assault and human trafficking, even. So we're going to discuss this because, unfortunately, some people on the right are really digging in and defending him, even though some of his comments and attitudes are pretty toxic, and even though there's some weight behind some of the charges against him. But first, guys, just here's a quick refresher on who Andrew Tate is, courtesy of a rather bombshell Vice documentary that just dropped, outlining his rise and the allegations against him.
Andrew Tate is an Anglo-American kickboxer turned influencer whose extreme misogynist videos have helped make him the most viral man in the world.
Bang out the machete, boom in her face, then grip her up by the neck. Shut up, bitch!
If you haven't heard of Andrew Tate yet, it's only a matter of time before he pops up on your newsfeed. His videos have been viewed over 11 billion times, and in July he was more Googled than Kim Kardashian and Donald Trump. He's been called the king of toxic masculinity.
He has said that rape victims should, quote, bear responsibility for being raped.
Yeah, so Hannah, Andrew Tate has said some pretty aggressive things about women and being property, and he actually got banned from Twitter years ago for suggesting that women have some responsibility or role when they are raped. And so just a heads up, talking about this guy and this whole conversation is going to be both discussing sexual assault, which can be upsetting for people, and also some of the clips we're going to roll are incredibly profane, and there's really no way to ameliorate that. So if you don't want to hear some vulgar language, now's the time to switch the radio dial in the car. But I think we knew something was a little sus with this guy because he actually got started on Big Brother. And listen to this clip from the documentary on something that happened while he was on that reality show in the UK.
When a video surfaced of him slapping his ex-girlfriend and then beating her with a belt.
Hey, you stupid bitch. I didn't say the word listen. Did I say listen? Did I say listen? No. Did I say it?
Public outrage simmered down after Andrew released a video of his ex, claiming it was all part of a so-called kinky game.
It was just pure game. It's just what we used to do.
But what the public didn't know, and what we can now reveal, is that around the time that Andrew was playing Truth or Dare in the Big Brother pool, the UK police had informed the production company that he was under investigation for 2 incidents involving other women. One of rape, and a further of physical assault.
So, Hannah, I know that this woman has come out and said after the fact that, it was consensual, but that seems sus to me. That doesn't seem like normal relationship healthy behavior of someone who respects women.
No, I mean, people are free to have their kinks, but my sniff test is always off in these kinds of situations because I've worked around the criminal justice system to the extent where I've seen this, right? The vast majority of women who are abused do not want to see themselves as abuse victims. It's almost as simple as that, right? You will hear women who've been raped use almost every other word to describe their rape besides rape. You'll see them deny things for years. It is so traumatizing as a woman to have these things perpetrated against you, especially if they fall into the public eye and people start discussing it openly, that a lot of women will do anything they can to explain it away to themselves. And, if they're still sort of with the abuser, they'll often recant. We see this with domestic abuse all the time, where women will, or men too sometimes, but women will call the police over domestic dispute, and then when they find out that they have to actually be the one to press charges against them, they will recant and pull back and refuse to participate. And that is for a number of reasons. One, often they're afraid of their abuser, rightfully so. The more money and power and influence a person has, the more fear I think a person has to come out against them. But secondarily, many people still love their abusers, right? I think a lot of people who've never been in an abusive situation or seen them up close see it as very black and white, right? Like, you would just leave. Why would you take it? And it's because abuse comes after a lot of mental, emotional abuse that usually breaks down a person, that makes them very attached to the abuser, often that makes them very dependent on the abuser, both emotionally and financially. And so there are all kinds of reasons that victims do not come forward, that they recant, that they fold, that they lie. And it is one factor that makes it very difficult to prosecute these cases. I have a lot of criticism for cops and prosecutors on how infrequently they solve rape cases, how they don't even test rape cases a lot of the time. But on the other hand, they are often very difficult cases to prosecute and take to court because of those factors.
Yeah, but some women are coming forward, and that's what this Vice documentary focused on. Two women have come forward, one who accuses Andrew Tate of sexual assault, and another one who accuses him of physical abuse. The first woman is using the pseudonym Amelia, and they're concealing her identity because they really do fear retaliation from Tate's fans. And he has this super rabid, I can't describe how intense his fan base is online. Some of it is a cult. In this Vice documentary, you see people who pay for this thing called the War Room, where they travel to Romania. They pay $5,000 for these group sessions he does with this men, where he makes them go in the ring with a professional fighter and get beat up, and they all cheer and toast to the top G. It is culty. But anyway, Amelia, here are her comments describing the experience that she allegedly had with Tate.
Started to make out on the bed. Out of the blue, he literally just stopped what he was doing and just laid back. He said, "I'm just contemplating whether I should rape you or not." And I promise you, within an instant, he changed. He just jumped straight on top of me, grabbed my throat, started suffocating me, strangling me. The more I didn't want to, it made him so much more aggressive, to the point where he was pinning me down, hurting me. The things he was saying to me, he was like, "Who do you belong to? Who do you belong to?" And the more I couldn't say it, the more he'd hurt me. So I couldn't see an escape.
And she's not just saying this, she actually also has a voice note from Tate that is kind of disturbing. Take a listen. This is his voice.
The more you didn't like it, the more I enjoyed it. I fucking loved how much you hated it. Turned me on. Are you seriously so offended I strangled you a little bit? You didn't fucking pass out. And all the women I've ever slept with, not a single one has ever bitched or complained like you are bitching and complaining now.
What's more, she also showed WhatsApp messages where he says, and this is a direct quote, "I love raping you," and also acknowledges that his behavior was abusive and controlling. Now, a lot of people, we of course believe in innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. We think due process, all that. We're not saying lock him up based on an accusation alone. But a lot of people are like, this is the Matrix coming to take down Tate. But this woman reported him to the UK police in 2014, before any of this happened, right? So it's not as if she's coming out of the woodwork suddenly, and she's got some receipts, Hannah. Those are pretty disturbing.
I mean, those are, when I saw that, I was like, what kind of idiot puts this in writing or in a voice memo? Like, per usual, these guys that run around being like, I'm the alpha male, are some of the dumbest people you will ever actually encounter. And he's just not got up with his own grift yet, but it's coming for him, I think. And so some of his fans who are rabid, who are indoctrinated, and who I think mostly need fathers in their lives. Like, they want to say, like, oh, he predicted that the state would come from him. They predicted this years ago. And I'm like, yeah, somebody who is raping people probably would predict that eventually they get arrested. Like, that's not some kind of gotcha at all. And yeah, due process, put them on trial, but good grief. I mean, this is absurd to have these kinds of things in print and audio. That's a lot more evidence than you usually get. And it just shows his arrogance, I think. And it's quite disturbing, and it's quite violent, and it comes as no surprise to me because everything I've learned against this man has been against my will. I've never sought anything out from him. As the Vice documentary actually shows, the way he's gained global prominence is he has this weird degree he sells where basically you learn how to like overtake women. That's what it sounds like. And in order to get his clips shared online, he gives all of these like young accounts 50% almost of what it costs to enter that program if they just share his clips and promote the program underneath it. And so you've got all these people desperate for money sharing his clips. And so he doesn't even have to like always circulate everything himself online. He has all these little minions doing it for him. And that's mostly how he has entered.
And that makes him kind of unbannable because they can ban his account, but they can't ban the thousands of fan accounts that all post his TikToks and stuff.
Right.
And he really has built up this empire.
I was going to say, he is raking it in off of these very gullible people. He's got them basically doing his work for him. It's really not an organic audience, right? It's people who are like, it's like a money marketing scheme. It's basically like a, what do you call them? An MLM?
Oh, an MLM, yeah. A multi-level marketing scheme.
That's basically what he's got going on, and he's raking it in from it.
If you drew it out on a map, would start to resemble an ancient Egyptian monument. What is it called? A pyramid. A pyramid. Yeah.
I mean, he's a basic old pyramid scheme cult leader grifter. Like, there's nothing special about this guy at all. And it's been very apparent in his clips since I first started seeing them that he is part of a nasty underbelly that hates women. I think there are a lot of men in society that are struggling. And I want to say that with empathy because I think people who fall prey to people like Andrew Tate, I think that comes from a place of like, you're not doing great. You're not thriving in life. You're not doing well. Especially as a man, you feel like you should have a different position of power or prominence that you're not getting, a certain level of respect in your life you're not getting. And you start to become, you start looking for other people to blame besides yourself. And I think women, especially modern women, make an easy scapegoat for that because they're not giving you what you want, right? They're not giving you respect. They're not marrying you. They're not having your babies. They're not cleaning your houses anymore. You have to actually do something to get a woman to want to marry you these days. And it seems like a lot of people in his following want to go back to a time where women were subjects and they were kings. And I just think it's a whole weird fantasy he sold them. Even in watching this documentary, like, I just felt like this is a documentary that would be seductive to 12-year-old boys. Like, they're zipping around sports cars. And he's like, I have all these women cleaning my house. And like, he's trying to act like he's so tough and he's made it. And like, you guys don't have this. And it's just, he's so empty throughout it. He's like showing off his toys. I mean, he just comes across as an emotionally stunted.
It's also, I just got to say, ironically, incredibly homoerotic. All of it. These men shirtless, working out together, constantly showing each other their muscles. It's like, this, it's a little sus.
Okay.
I'm just saying. But no, I agree with your main point, though, to get back on track here, is like, Andrew Tate doesn't happen in a society where there is not a crisis in masculinity, right? There are so many young men, and some of it is, things that they need to work out themselves, why they're not succeeding in life. But some of it is the way our society is treating young men and telling them that being a man is toxic or whatever it may be. There are very real challenges that young men are facing, and there's not really a positive modern form of what masculinity should look like. We've decided that the old masculinity is toxic and canceled, and some of it was, to be fair. But there's not really a positive vision, I don't think. And a lot of young men feel very adrift. And I can have empathy for that, but I don't think charlatans like Andrew Tate are the answer, but that is what people end up drawn to in a vacuum.
I think that's absolutely right. I do like that you called out the homoerotic nature of it, because that's what I was thinking when I was watching this. I was like, you guys pay $5,000 to let this man beat you up and get on top of you in a ring. Like, okay. And it also gave like major Fight Club, sort of things. Yeah. Like, and I'm just like, Fight Club was a schizophrenic man's like fantasy. Like that really shouldn't be what you're striving for in real life. I don't know. We do need other outlets for men. We need other examples of masculinity for men. And I think we need to have real conversations about why men and women are just missing each other right now in society as a whole. I really think that a lot of men do not like women. I think they want to have sex with women. I think they want the benefits of being with a woman as far as like what she can add to their lives. But I don't think they always really like women. And I think the reverse can be said of true.
I was about to say, I think a lot of modern women don't like men very much.
They don't. They really don't. I often hear women say, kind of jokingly, but like not really. Like, obviously, being a lesbian isn't a choice because if I could choose, I would be. Right? Like, I hear women say that all the time.
It's a Gen Z young woman vibe to be like, hate men, kill all men, LOL. And they're sort of joking.
But sort of.
Really. But like, yeah. And it's definitely very, very messed up. And there's a lot to unpack there. But we shouldn't be, I think, glomming on and celebrifying, that's not a word, but I made it up, an abuser or alleged abuser it'd be over this. So up next in this Vice documentary on Andrew Tate, a woman named Sally, or her pseudonym, explains that she felt she was physically abused by Andrew Tate when they were together, and she claims that she allegedly saw him sexually assault another woman right in front of her eyes. Take a listen.
He used to strangle us as well. There was another time when he came into the bedroom, me and the other girl, we would sleep in the same bed with Andrew, but at this time the girl had a partner, so she was not interested in Andrew at all. And I had gone to the shower, I came back and I noticed he was, like, I saw him raping her. And when he threatened to beat me up in the bathroom, and he said, "Oh, I don't give a fuck if you call the police, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you." That's kind of when I knew, I had to get out of there.
Now, these are all British women who are accusing him and who actually went and worked with the police in 2014-15. So again, before The Matrix, before he was a celebrity, any of this. And I find their claims compelling, in part because he has essentially admitted that the reason he moved to Romania was to evade accountability in the West that he frames as not having due process, which sometimes it doesn't, but again, the West, England, the US, has the most due process of just about anywhere in the world. Not perfect, but anyway, take a listen to this clip of Andrew Tate.
When people say, why did you live in Romania? And I explain my 5 reasons. One of them is the Me Too era. They go, oh, well, you're a rapist. I say, no, I'm not a fucking rapist. But I like the idea of being able to just say, to do what I want. I like being free. And if you're a man living in England or Germany or America or any of the Western world right now, you've decided to live in a country where any woman, any ex, any fucking bitch who works at Greg's who you bought a pasty from, at some point in the future can destroy your life. This Me Too era bullshit has not protected women. It's just destroyed the safety of men.
So is it just me, or is he kind of giving the game away a little bit in that one?
I mean, that was an eerie... It's crazy to me the things people say on camera. It gives Brian Kohberger vibes, honestly. Like, the things that you're documenting and putting online and saying, it shocks me. It's just stupid as a whole. But, I mean, most criminals are stupid. So, to me, again, he needs due process. There needs to be a trial. But that sounds pretty on its face to me. Like, that you basically don't want to have the ability for rape victims to investigate you or to bring claims against you, a couple years later. That's the sad reality about statute of limitations. I mean, I kind of disagree on how low the litmus test actually is for the statutes many times, because oftentimes it does take women quite a bit of time to come forward. And I think, as one woman in another Vice piece said, she ended up dating him after he raped her. And that actually is pretty common too. I actually heard, Holly, who had been she was one of the playmates that dated Hugh Hefner that was on The Girls Next Door back in the day. So she was, a big name for a little bit. She was like the number one girlfriend. She was always like, I want to marry Hef. And now, years later, after she's left that sort of abusive situation and moved on in their life, she's talked about how she basically felt like she was taken advantage of the first time they hooked up, but to make sense of it in her mind and to try to be like, oh, that wasn't rape. I still controlled the situation. I can make something out of it. She went on to date him. And I think that actually tracks. I really think that's something that a lot of people will use to try to discount these stories of like, well, if he raped you, why would you date him?
Well, I actually think that's at play in here. I actually believe Amelia, the first one, did continue to pursue a relationship with him, which is part of why the UK police didn't go forward with the case, because they were like, a jury won't like that. But again, it's kind of a rational trauma response. If it did happen, it's alleged, right? That you would try to form a relationship with this person. And apparently this is a common thing that psychologists will explain to make it not have happened, right? Because if you're dating someone, then that first time wasn't a sexual assault, right? I mean, it's really sad logic, but it is human.
Yep. I think that's exactly right. And again, it's just one of those instances where we need to do a better job of educating the human population on just how people respond when these things happen to them. And I hope our show can do that for people, because I have seen it up close and I've seen this repeat. This is a pattern, and it doesn't make their story any less true. It also doesn't mean that there shouldn't be, investigations and due process. I really try to toe that line and make sure that we're never just saying the sort of believe all victims kind of narrative. I don't agree with that. I think that there needs to be evidence. There needs to be investigations when people make these kinds of claims. But on the other hand, I think we have to stop victim blaming, and we certainly have to stop saying, oh, if this were true, then your reaction would be this. Because when you say that, especially as someone who's never lived through those kinds of incidents, you are making wild assumptions that you would not made one about you at all. Like, it's the same thing when they say, like, oh, if somebody was truly innocent, then they'd talk to the police or they'd, cooperate with police. And it's like, no, like, that is not the case. Oftentimes, if you're smart, you don't cooperate with police because you know that they can be unscrupulous in some of their activities. So all that to say, things are not black and white when it comes to these situations. There's often a lot of nuance, and I hope that people start becoming more aware of that so that they can be better evaluators of truth and lies and better participants in our justice system. Because I actually think that's one of the most important duties you have as a citizen, is to be informed enough to be a good juror, to be active in the justice system and make sure that we are allocating it in a way that is constitutional and fair and that can be upheld, right? To where people still have faith in the justice system and its ability to ensure that we don't put innocent people behind bars, but we also are getting dangerous people off the streets.
So why do you think it is that, I mean, to be fair, a lot of mainstream people have condemned this guy or called him out for some of the toxic things he said for these allegations. Even like Ben Shapiro, for example, has called him out and really held him to account. But a lot of online influencers on the right and in conservative internet culture are defending him, saying like the Matrix, the globalists, they're just all trying to take him out, all this conspiratorial stuff. And it's like, I get why they're saying it, because they've invested a lot in propping this man up, and they'd have a lot of the egg on their face if they admitted what it seems that he is. But they say this is what will happen if anyone speaks out against the establishment. No, not really. Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, literally so many people have spoken out against the establishment and never had, almost decades old sexual assault allegations brought up that were filed with police against them from multiple women. I mean, this is not the Matrix taking him out. I that's just so cringe when I see people saying that.
People on the right have got to get a hold of themselves, because they are doing significant damage to their reputation right now. I feel like there are conspiracy theories on the left as well, but the right has increasingly had a propensity to buy into conspiracy theories and to buy into like some things that are just really detached from reality over the past decade that are really hurting their credibility and just making them look kind of Looney Tunes. I mean, the whole idea of like a Matrix coming after this guy, no. Like you said, there are plenty of people who are anti-establishment, plenty of people who speak out against the government, plenty of people who are countercultural. You can't excuse these kinds of allegations as just some grand conspiracy. Like, there are evil people out there who do bad things. And when you start to see credible evidence of that, then you should be on the side of wanting to find out more at the very least, if not standing against them being able to continue those sorts of actions due to their positions of power. I'll never understand that mentality. I also truly don't understand why it is that increasingly on the right, I see the grassroots come to the defense of men who seem to be sexual predators. And
like, that is not a conservative thing, like a social, religious, no.
Even like, and what's funny is like, it's often like these weird trad men online who are like, find you a woman who just wants a baby, he's not a boss babe, as if like the boss babes are coming for them. And then they'll be like, you need to have traditional values, And it's like, okay, this guy is literally sleeping with hordes of women that he boasts about. Like,
He got rich off
basically
porn.
Got rich off porn. Like, what are you talking about traditional values, right? There is nothing conservative or trad about any of this. And it's just such a hypocritical, like, they'll be the same people that condemn girls for doing OnlyFans and then praise Andrew Tate for basically running OnlyFans out of his house. Like, I don't understand the hypocrisy. It's rank. I also don't understand how you think this is in any way. Like, they tend to have this, like, if you're with us, you're with us. And, like, the main thing is that we're against the left. And it's like, no, you lose more and more and more people by continuing to let people, these seedy people in your circles. I don't care if he's found guilty or innocent of these things. Nobody should want to associate with someone who speaks this way, period. He's seedy. He's a creep. I mean, he really gives off just, like, totally beta vibes to me, where I'm just like, he's like this sinister little, like, ugh, I'm honestly surprised women would even sleep with somebody like this. Like, he's so gross to me. But I think as long as you let these people in your circles and you don't condemn that kind of language, then you associate yourselves with them, and fewer respectable people want to have anything to do with you or your movement. And so you're going to keep losing to the left, actually. Because as much as people dislike the left and what they're doing, they're not simping for people like this. All right, let's go to the mailbag. Up first, we have HB, who says, I can't believe you got kicked off a gay soccer team, to Brad.
Yeah, every once in a while this story comes up, but yep, it's true. I was kicked off, basically shown the door of a gay men's soccer league that I was in DC because they said my opinions that children shouldn't be medically transitioned were transphobic and endangered the safety of hypothetical transgender men who joined the team. But you know what? Since then, I've just played with straight dudes, and they've never really looked at me twice. And I think that says a lot about the kind of far left fringe of the LGBT community.
It does.
All right. Nicholas says 2 things. First, an unpopular opinion of mine. I'm not a fan of term limits. I just don't like the government telling me who I'm allowed to vote for. Second, that bless your heart thing. The entire phrase is something like, bless your heart because the Lord surely hasn't blessed your mind. If true, wow, that's quite the dig. And I've never really cared much about term limits one way or the other. Yeah, just not a motivating thing for me.
I've never heard that phrase, but that makes it such a better dig. I might actually use that. That's incredible. And actually, that is a popular opinion around here because I'm also anti-term limits. I used to be in favor. I now think they would do nothing other than kick the best people out of office, like who actually we want to keep there. And I don't think that that's actually the real problem. I don't think the length of time that people are in office is the problem at all. Happy to talk at length about what I do think the root causes of problems are, but not today because we're already over time. All right, Z Stinson, how is it possible that this channel only has 20,000 subs based? You know, we would like to know that too, YouTube.
Yeah. Cereal Bowl, Hannah will like this one, asks, how does the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, still exist after Waco and Ruby Ridge? I don't know.
Great question.
I don't know what we would do without paramilitary hordes of government bureaucrats to raid people over alcohol and tobacco.
Yeah, if you want to have a new hobby, I love to watch Spike Cohen just totally troll the ATF across all social media platforms. It sparks joy for me. John Harris said, New Haven style, most New York style, St. Louis style, Ohio Valley style, and Neapolitan style pizzas will tend to make many disagree with Brad's hot take.
Oh,
I
the
don't
thin
know
pizza
what.
thing.
Have you heard of any of those?
Yeah. He's saying all these kinds of thin pizza are good. Nope. Pass.
I've never heard of them though, and I'm a foodie. I'm a food connoisseur. I've only heard of like the New York style, so I'm gonna have to Google some of those.
Demetris said, I love you, Brad. Great podcast, you too. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I love you too, though I don't know who you are.
Sam Johnson said, very difficult to get involved in the school boards. Most of the elected members of school boards are blessed by the unions and party bosses. Ain't that right?
I actually had a friend who ran for school board and ran a great campaign. Her whole thing was get back to basics, no woke stuff, let's focus on math and STEM. No politics. And she was not successful because it really is difficult, even though that seems like it would be a very popular message.
All right. Lastly, we have HB who says, thank you for keeping an eye on education and parents. You're welcome. We care a lot about that. All right, Brad, what's your hot take for the week?
My hot take is that MLK Day, look, I think MLK is amazing, great. I've read Letter from a Birmingham Jail yesterday morning, and a lot of his work's moving. I don't really see why it needs to be a federal holiday in terms of people not working. Like, just explain this to me. I was very annoyed because you and I worked yesterday, and I'm emailing my contacts and my sources trying to do reporting, and no one's working. And I'm like, why? It's not as if people are spending, with Christmas or Easter or something, you know, people are spending the day doing holiday activities with their families, whatever. Basically, nobody is spending the long weekend with MLK Day reading the works of the great reverend. Like, it's just a random day off. And federal government employees already have so many holidays that they effectively work 4 days a week on average. So, not really sure it should be a holiday from the labor force. Don't really see why it is.
Yeah, I mean, you and I often have this problem where we work on holidays, and I was doing that yesterday because, to be frank, I never know when holidays are. Like, I never know. I just don't keep up with them because I love my job and, like, it just doesn't matter that much. So I was working away and getting the same thing where it was just sort of, like, dead online and everywhere. And then around noon, I was like, oh, it's a holiday. Like, people are not working. Well, speaking of holidays, my trash got delayed by a day because yesterday was MLK Day. So I have to take out my trash.
All the trash workers, Hannah, had to be at home reading the works of MLK Jr. That's what they were doing, of course.
As we know that they were. But now it's raining today, so now I have to take out my trash in the rain, and I think my hot take is that girls shouldn't have to take out their trash. I don't think it should be required of us, and I think there should be some kind of, like, service you can opt into or pay for where the garbage people just actually come into your place and take the trash for you, because it's gross.
What is it about it that's so bad to you? It's like, really, it takks 60 seconds.
No, it is that it's dirty and gross. Sometimes it leaks on you. Sometimes it cuts you. It's heavy. So if you just have one of those wheels that you can, like, wheel out to the street, that's fine. But I don't, because in my complex, like, there's stairs to get out my front door, and also, like, my trash is kept out back. So I'd have to wheel the thing through my house and out front to actually get it out. So I have to, like, take the bags out of the trash can, bring them through the house and out. It's just gross. It's disgusting. I hate it. I can't explain why. Also, I'm always, like, really nervous going around the trash outside, like, if there's gonna be rodents or something. That's never happened to me in my life, knock on wood, but it's just, like, a deep-seated fear I have. Kind of like when you get into the ocean, you're scared of a shark.
See, Hannah, modern women still need alpha males.
Yeah, I do. I love actual alpha males. Like, I have lots of true alpha males in my family who are stand-up men, who love women, who protect their families and their communities. Like, I'm all about real alpha males. Bring it on. All right, guys, that's a wrap. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a comment. We'll try to read it on air. And until next week, stay based.